Hey everyone, want to know the questions that you should be asking when investing into the psychedelic space when it comes to research? Well, here are 2 or 3 things that you should be asking in our latest podcast. Hey everyone, welcome to the Dales Report, and today happy to be joined with the Chief Science Officer for Mydecine Innovations, Rob Roscow, back to the podcast. Rob, happy holidays. How are things?
Oh, things are great. It's been an exciting new year so far. How are you doing, Shed?
Not bad. I know the industry, as far as the market perspective, could be doing a little bit better, to say the least. But I think the most important thing, great news, obviously, last week, the SAP program, Special Access Program out of Canada. I thought that was encouraging. But most importantly, it's just we continue to see progress being made in the industry. And I know it's probably not at a pace that some investors would like. But the long-term health has never looked better for this industry based on the data that's being done based on the research as well, right?
Absolutely. No, I think we're going to see across 2022 a really strong acceleration of positive data. And
do you?
Definitely.
So what does that mean then? As we get more and more positive data, sounds encouraging, but how much development does that, do we start to see a lot of pharmaceutical partnerships being announced this year? And if so, obviously that's going to lead into more institutional money being allocated into the industry. But is that something that you guys do anticipate happening in the next 12 months?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it is something that we anticipate. And I think specifically in the area around novel iterations or improvements on the psychedelic compounds of interest. I think we're going to see continued clinical reports coming out from the phase 1 classical psychedelics. But then our company, as well as others, have been really strongly focused on how do we make improvements to take those first generation molecules and make them more compatible, safer, more efficacious in a specifically medical context. And I know from our side, we definitely have data coming out across the next year in exactly that category.
It's great. I want to begin with great news for your company, Mydecine. You just completed a target-based model of serotonin receptor 5-HT2A for use in your AI-driven drug discovery program. Sounds very sophisticated, but before we get into specifics, explain to my viewers what this means and most importantly, why they should care.
Absolutely. So I think it's best to kind of compare and contrast traditional drug development with and without an AI layer. And so traditionally, you have chemists making, guesses as to possible changes that you can make to these molecules. Usually they're educated guesses, but you end up with only a few candidates from this work. And then there's a lot of expensive and time-consuming screening that needs to be done on the benchtop in animal models and later human clinical trials. And so what AI does is it allows you at the beginning of that process to use computer modeling to filter that. You're basically replicating some of those earlier phases of trial on the benchtop, but in the computer, so you can try many more structures at much lower costs and much more quickly. So it's a very good way to filter and generate better candidates for the later stages of the process.
So whose idea to bring this all together was it?
So this has really been an idea that we've had since the beginning of Mydecine. We came into this space knowing that there would be a lot of iterative drug development around these structures and knowing that AI and machine learning would be a very, very strong tool for doing so. And so we're really excited that we've been able to partner with Dr. Khalid Barakat's lab up at the University of Alberta for doing this. They have a very strong expertise in doing exactly that, modeling these receptors for this type of filtering.
So what's the long-term benefits of this process versus traditional ways of making different medicines? What will this translate into?
Absolutely. So in our hands, having this model of the 5-HT2A receptor allows us to do 2 things really in broad strokes. One, it allows us to screen any of the candidates that we're already looking at. So any of those later stages that I was just mentioning of benchtop analysis, animal model, or clinical trial, all of those are very, very expensive and time consuming.
Right.
So,
right.
Running these through the models initially, we can basically hedge our bets that we place later on in the process and make sure that they're very risk reduced. Secondly, what this allows us to do is also look at structures that we haven't been looking at before. We can use the modeling as a tool to generate new structures that are similar to what we've already been looking at, but specifically different. And this at a basic level generates new patentable drugs that are similar to what we're already working with. So we're very excited about that as well.
Is this a trend do you think will start to emerge more and more within the industry?
I absolutely do. And I don't think just in the psychedelic drug development space, but across all drug development. I mean, this is an incredibly powerful tool for making sure that any of the real world work, if you will, is already, validated by the computer modeling, and the techniques and tools that people like Dr. Khalid Barakat have for employing these techniques are just increasing as well. So both the raw materials needed for doing this work are getting better over time, and the applications are also getting better.
Yeah. Being the chief science officer, and we've talked quite a bit over the past year or so, isn't it, you ever look back and think of how much this industry's grown over the past 12 months? And based off of that, what's important information that you can share to people that, I guess in some ways, are looking from an investment standpoint, saying, where is this industry going? Yes, it's moving a lot slower than what I originally thought. A lot of people got in thinking it was like the next cannabis, so to speak. But from a pure research perspective, what are some important elements that you can share with my viewers to say we are in very, very good shape and we're about to turn the corner to see even more big growth heading into 2022? What would that be?
I think the biggest thing is sort of the shift in the theming of the industry, if you will, from, like you were saying, almost like a second cannabis industry into really what it is, which is a drug development, pharmaceutical type industry. And the data that's coming out of the research is really across maybe the last 6 months, and then also anticipated over this next year, is really matching exactly what you would expect from that startup pharmaceutical type industry, where you see positive or negative preclinical data coming out. And really that's what I think is going to happen over the next year, is that we'll see the levers, if you will, that are changing the climate in the industry start to look and continue to look a lot more like traditional pharma space, as opposed to what we all saw in the cannabis space. And I think that will specifically attract a lot of larger pharmaceutical companies.
Well, when I think of the growth, people forget it's the whole biomedical industry right now is obviously flat right now. But, if that ever does turn the corner, it's been flat here for 9 months or so now within the industry. But one thing that has not been flat, again, is the efficacy that continues to be producing. And it's just like at all levels, doctors, researchers, the current times we live in, everything is overwhelmingly positive. Like, have you ever seen something where an industry where it just seems like the data, you almost have to look twice because of how much positive data it's producing?
Yeah, I do quite often actually look back at the data and then make sure that I'm seeing what I actually see at the first pass, because it's really exciting that we have both a new category of drugs that really doesn't have an already approved, comparator in a lot of ways. And the fact that the efficacy, especially when paired with therapy, is so high, it's incredibly promising and exciting that way. But I do occasionally, I'll look back and make sure that I'm not misreading things.
Yeah. I do think therapy is something important that gets overlooked sometimes within the industry. The proper research is going to need to be taken place, but I think that's already starting to happen with a number of companies. But something that I think at times does get overlooked. A lot of focus with regards to your company, has been geared towards your research for the smoking cessation and securing financing for the upcoming phase 2-3 clinical trial. So, based off of that, the financing will also allow you to meet important milestones for the PTSD study, which had been off, I guess, the radar as of late. So can you maybe give us an update on where the PTSD sits right now in terms of clinical trial timelines?
Absolutely. So the thing that we've been, kind of doing in the background, what we've been more vocal about, the smoking cessation, is really putting together a large group of PIs that are very, very experienced in PTSD research, that are very interested in looking at how can we pair psilocybin with traditional PTSD therapy. And so across this group, we're actually looking at seeing our first patients in Q2 or Q3 of this year. And it's actually an international group with over a half dozen sites in 3 different countries. And so really the ability for us to leverage the expertise within this group is incredibly high. And to compare it to our smoking cessation work, this is where we view ability to show efficacy with psilocybin for a very severe, complex, and intractable condition, whereas something like smoking cessation is, while it's a deadly condition that causes cancer, heart disease, etc., is much more simple psychologically. And so we've been comparing and contrasting the two, and are really excited to see patients in both arms of our work in the next coming year.
I've had Dr. Jetley on before, and refresh my memory when it comes to some of the early signs of success in comparison to like the study that you're doing now, in comparison to the patch, for example, and what the success rate are as compared to the two. And it was pretty staggering, to say the least, was it not?
Absolutely. So the interim data on Dr. Johnson's work with smoking cessation is showing over 60% quit rate, and a very durable quit rate. This is really the thing that to me jumps out the most, is that if you look at quit rates with things like nicotine replacement therapy, or what people normally think of as patches and gums for nicotine cessation, you see a strong efficacy in maybe 1 or 2 months, but then at a year out, it's basically there's no effect. It's the same as just a placebo where people are quitting cold turkey. We're seeing in the data that's coming in off of the already ongoing work with Dr. Johnson that this is even really durable 6 months out, a year out, and then longer. And so to me, that's really the exciting thing, is not only are we showing data that people are able to quit smoking, but also that it's a very durable quit, where they're not just quitting for 3 months and then need to go back to a new therapy.
Yeah. What is the percent of people that quit but then eventually go back? Like, how many times on average does a person have to quit in order to completely quit?
So the numbers of times is really high. It's, a half dozen to dozen times, but then completely quitting with a cold turkey type approach is below 10%. It's a 9%, 8%, something like that. So, I mean, it's really a very low success rate. And then also you have to look at, and this is kind of back to what I was saying originally, if you look at how that's scored, a lot of times the data that people are referring to is only scoring whether they've quit for 3 months, and then they don't care what happens after that, or 6 months. And so the idea that this lasts, with the same sort of rates at 3 months, 6 months, a year, beyond a year is really exciting, because you don't want people to just quit smoking for a few months. You want this to be a durable
100%
solution.
Is there any adverse effects with related to the trial? If so, like, what would they be, or is there none?
So with any medication, there's adverse effects, but they've really been minimal compared to what one might expect. So you think of, providing psilocybin to a wide variety of people, because we've been providing such strong psychological support, and Dr. Johnson in the preliminary work has already been doing that. We really think that this is the answer to a lot of the possible adverse effects. Patients, when they're supported quite well, have adverse effects that are either generally minimal or addressable by the therapist.
Which brings the importance of therapy, right?
Exactly. Doesn't mean that they're absent, but they're certainly tackleable in the context of what we're treating.
Yeah. Good stuff. New year upon us. As you know, and I don't have to bring this up, but I will. It's been a tough capital markets environment, to say the least, ever since Compass obviously released, their phase 2B results back in early November when we were in Miami, and CEO Josh Barch was saying overreaction to incredibly positive news for the amount of people that we're selling. So most everyone has got caught in the negative feedback loop of, declining equity markets ever since that did happen. Yet one thing that was impressive is that you guys during these last 2 months were able to raise money while some other companies have not. So at least not as of yet. So first, how were you able to do it during these times? Because when I'm looking at this space, what are the things when you're raising money and you're looking into this space that people are able to do, specific companies like yours? What are important questions they should be asking? Meaning, like, when I'm investing in a company, who am I looking at based on from a research perspective, based on a collaboration agreement perspective? Like, what would be some of the things that you would look for when entering this space?
Absolutely. So I think the thing that's really let us stand out in this, sort of a difficult time, like you summarized there, is the idea that we have strong fundamentals across, short term, moderate term, and then long term. And this takes the form of a variety of things, both patent work as well as collaborations and relationships. And so in the short term, Mydecine is probably one of the strongest clinical trials around psilocybin specifically with smoking cessation. This is a very mature work that's been ongoing for almost 10 years at Johns Hopkins, a leader in the field by one of the leading researchers in the field, Dr. Matt Johnson. And so I think that's really, solidified our fundamentals in the short term. And then if you look at our press releases and what we've been talking about doing in our research across the moderate and long term, we have a really solid plan on how do we take something that's already efficacious like psilocybin and then make it safer, more efficacious, more controllable in a medical setting. And that's exactly what all of our research and patent work is around, is how do you remove anxiety as an example? How do you control the time course so it's more compatible with a normal therapy session? How do you provide better delivery control to reduce side effects? All of these things have been, squarely in our interest. And I think that for a, investor who's knowledgeable about the space, they can see that. And so for a new investor coming into the space, I think really the questions that are appropriate to ask are similar to other drug development companies. Where are the milestones that are showing efficaciousness? Where are things moving from good idea to prototype drug in different levels of trials? And so I think those are really the questions that people need to be asking.
Last thing I want to touch on before we let you go, what excites you? If you had to share it to a group of audience right now and investors, what excites you the most from a research perspective going into 2022? It's a broad
really
question,
excited.
isn't it?
It's a hard question because there's probably 5 things that excite me or more. So how do I choose one?
I'll give you 2 or 3. How's that, Rob?
That's good. I can work with that. That definitely works. So I think, firstly, I'm very excited to start seeing patients in both of our clinical trial arms that are putting our psilocybin product, our MYCO-001, into those. So that's, again, both the PTSD work that we were talking about earlier and then the smoking cessation work with Johns Hopkins. So really excited to actually having, trials running with patients there. And then on the opposite side of things, we have a lot of work going on with our novel molecules. And so to me, as the chief scientific officer, I'm very excited to see the structures that we've been working on, press releasing about, patenting over the last, year, 2 years, depending on the individual molecule. I'm excited to see the data come back on those and be, supporting what we've already been working on.
It's great. Keep up the great work. A lot of progress being made, but I think slowly but surely this will all come together and make sense for a lot of people in the long run, because it's, as I said before, it's pretty incredible that the government of Canada even last week announced that, from a medicinal standpoint, doctors can start administering, obviously MDMA, but it's a huge growth opportunity for this industry and continues to move in the right direction. But it really is an eye-opener as the research that continues to get produced time and time again. But appreciate you taking the time and obviously keep up the great work.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Shed.
Thanks, Rob. Appreciate your time.